overpasses that are converted into added with pedestrian bridges and other things. If this is going to advance for me, Nathan. So it starts with that planning process, but it really is the goal, and you can get multiple LCI construction grants out of the same area, and most places have, particularly the larger places like I'll touch on. So there's an upfront plan. Most of the teams had 3 different types of professional expertise. They had architecture and land use, urban design. They had engineering, obviously, and transportation planning. And then actually almost every LCI has a market study. So there was also a focus on trying to be as realistic as possible with the economic possibilities of each of these areas. So I'm just going to give a few examples. If you're familiar with Atlanta, you may know some of these places. So this is what's called unironically Perimeter Center, which is on 285. It is one of the earliest edge cities. It grew up around Perimeter Mall, which is right there with the red dot. This is Georgia 400 and 285. Georgia 400 is to the left, and 285 is to the bottom of the page. What you see there is it was built basically without a lot of sidewalks. It was built as a car destination. Was very successful. It was one of the biggest kind of edge city developments. And when we started working, I think there was 22 million square feet of office in Perimeter Center. So it is massive in terms of how many people come into this activity center on a daily basis. But it was starting to lose its market share because the traffic was so bad you couldn't get there. So Perimeter Center had a community improvement district, a self-taxing business district. So in a way, it would be a corollary to our management districts in Kentucky. But in a place like this, Perimeter Center, for instance, self-taxes and generates about $6 to $7 million a year. So that's a tremendous impetus when you have to do local match and you're trying to get other things. But it was actually the business improvement district that created the LCI here in partnership with. This actually also straddles 2 counties. So this is Fulton County and DeKalb County. So they had the 2 jurisdictions were jointly funding or participating in this with the community improvement district. That was Perimeter Center. And what the focus of that, and you can see just in an aerial how much investment and how much development has happened still in Perimeter. So that mall started to fill in what was the backside of the mall, which was just a few low-slung office buildings kind of behind the mall. The other thing is this area had 4 MARTA stations, subway stations, but they were not really designed as TOD. They were, for the most part, kind of in parking lots and other. So a lot of the focus was along, and you can kind of see it's a curving line that's actually the rail line that goes through Perimeter. So what you've seen is just continued significant investment in here, which arguably wouldn't have been possible. Now, granted, there was a lot of traditional transportation improvements to Georgia 400, flyovers and other things that have happened, but on the ground, the focus was on taking these streets. So you're behind the mall. This is Perimeter Center Parkway. The mall's to your right. That's the MARTA line running elevated there. The left was mostly trees and suburban office parks. The idea was to develop, kind of urbanity, and the LCI in this case, which has been built, was the actual street. So to put in the crosswalks, to put in improvements to the median, to add sidewalks and bike lanes or trails through the area. That's kind of an aerial of kind of some of those original projects. Perimeters have multiple LCI projects. Of course, once they had a plan and they had all these ideas of projects that have been agreed to, they also started going after other types of federal funding or whatever. So it's not just LCI that's now in there. Another example is a corridor. This is Holcomb Bridge out a little bit in the suburbs. Their focus was both the commercial district, which was just a traditional strip corridor, and trying to densify and figure out development opportunities. But also in their case, they wanted to kind of celebrate and accentuate kind of a trail and open space system that was nearby. So there was a lot of effort, not just in the corridor itself, but in trying to figure out how to connect it around it. And then finally, what I say is the best client that's ever existed for a planning firm in history. This is the city of Sewanee, Georgia, which is at the very edge of Gwinnett County. So it is 30 miles outside the city. So it was a railroad stop. You can see that the railroad is actually just below where it says Sewanee. You can kind of see the railroad coming. So that's the only reason it existed. It was just a little small stop. That right next to that longer building that's on the railroad was their downtown, which was literally 1 block. So they got an LCI grant because everybody has to do an LCI plan. And so we need to do one for our downtown. But this was a very progressive city that saw it as an opportunity to redefine what Sewanee was. Sewanee was just a bedroom community. It had this 1 block downtown. It was mostly, as you can tell, subdivisions and forest. So when they hired us, to look at ostensibly that 1 block of the downtown, we pointed out how difficult it was going to ever be to get a bunch of roads and things into that without somewhat affecting the small pieces of historic buildings and other things that were there, because it just was not built at that time. But we pointed out that out at the corner of their major road to the right, which is a forest, maybe you could consider both improving downtown, but also building one. So this is in progress. They actually took that to heart and decided that they would just build a new downtown. And so they used the LCI program to invest in the park and street and roadway and pedestrian improvements, and have continued to do that. This is Sewanee today. So that corner that was just forest is now their main downtown, and you can see how much development. The other thing about the LCI program I should have said is the intent was to leverage private investment. So all the development is obviously just private developers coming in, once the table's been set with the improvements to the transportation network and the quality of life network. So that town center, that's an aerial view. That was our original plan, and then you can see it built out. So this is their new park. That's actually their new city hall. They moved and built a new city hall. This city has grown tremendously over these 20 years as well. Behind it is a townhouse community that a private developer built. And this was a place, it was funny to see because the Atlanta Journal-Constitution had a big article about the land rush in Sewanee, because there were people like waiting to try to get into these townhouses and stuff just because of all the amenities and the niceness of, that would be right out your door. So there's also been kind of these follow-up supplemental studies. One of them that we've done is in Tucker, which is an older suburb of Atlanta to the east in DeKalb County. This gives you an example. In their case, they wanted to get to a fine-grained detail of the street network and alley network. Tucker had all of these alleys in their original downtown, and they wanted to try to figure out what was possible to do with them. They reclaimed some of them for public space, and have kind of made those like outdoor dining, and then others they were just doing pedestrian or transportation improvements. So with that, I'm going to ask my colleague Sadie, who in a previous life was worked here at KYTC. So I thought she might kind of touch on some of the relevant aspects of how the program worked and what it touched.
All right. Hello, I'm Sadie Middleton. I know some of you guys from a few years ago. But some of the things about the LCI program that make it so effective are, one, how the money is programmed and actually used, and two, the policy changes that are inspired by these types of plans. So using Sewanee as an example, you can build streets and you can build bike ped facilities, but not always does building it mean that people will come. There has to be something there. There has to be a destination. So part of that is getting city and private developers and just the entire planning and governing community to enact policy changes from rezonings or form-based codes or design guidelines or even financial incentives at a city level to help go vertical and build things along these new infrastructure improvements. So you can see this is, I think, is from 2015 or 2020, but these are the amounts of policy-based changes that have happened completely outside of the LCI formal process itself. Part of that is creating partnerships. So the ARC in Atlanta is the MPO. They've partnered with a lot of private entities and created separate programs within the MPO to enact the implementation suggestions that were in the LCI plans. Those can be from neighborhood organizations, downtown Main Street programs, development authorities, and also like they work with Delta and the electric companies to use their philanthropic branches to enact these changes as well.
And so one of the things, and this might be a resource if it's, they created LCI toolkits is what they called them, and they were around some of these policy issues or whatever. So that's what they worked with a lot of these partners, is to help develop kind of a best practice toolkit so that there would be a resource that any jurisdiction could look up in the state and say, oh, that's how that worked. That's how that ordinance worked. And so that a lot of these partnerships were around, like I said, a specific aspect that one of the partners was interested in.
One of their largest partners too is MARTA, which is their transit agency. So by partnering with MARTA and creating transit-oriented developments, communities are able to leverage both FHWA and FTA funds to bring the plans to life. So just for a operation overview, so the LCI program, the ARC uses about $2 million of their STBG funds and programs them into their TIP for planning annual application programs. So then communities can apply throughout an annual solicitation for applications, and that money comes out of that pot that's already programmed every few years at the MPO level. As Dan mentioned, ARC will pay 80% and the local match is 20%. There's a really in-depth scoring matrix that's available on their website that shows how competitive and what information is needed within these applications. And then the separate implementation portion of it is solicited through a normal project scoring process, just like any other MPO TIP programming. So the LCI program has committed to providing funding for engineering and design study work on these projects to help create, for example, the screenshot is, interchange improvements, multi-use trails, road diets, anything like that that would have been identified within the LCI plan for that community.
One of the interesting aspects that's happened out of this is the larger jurisdictions, city of Atlanta, some of the bigger counties, whatever. As you all know, sometimes it's the design and engineering that's really messy and complicated and whatever. Most of them have started just doing that on their own. So they'll go ahead and do that so they can get the project defined and costed enough that they feel comfortable to apply for the implementation. So it's also kind of spurred local investment in transportation design and engineering. Now, a lot of small communities don't have that wherewithal to have a lot of money to do design and engineering. So it's really more the larger jurisdictions that have started spending money to position themselves for the grants.
I think another important thing to note about the LCI program, both for planning and the transportation implementation portion of it, is that the communities put out RFPs and RFQs to select their design and planning teams after receiving the funding from the award cycle. And here's a pie chart, I think also from either 2015 or 2020 of just the breakdown of how the implementation money is spent. So most of that funding is spent on pedestrian facilities, but it can also be used on things like transit or bike facilities or even operations and, as I mentioned, road diets or complete street type projects. So some of the things that we think make LCI so successful is that it uses existing federal funding. There's not any sort of creation or begging for new money. It's money that's already there. It's voluntary and it's an incentive-based program, so communities can opt in to participating and take advantage of that resource. There's also local control and involvement, both through the 20% match that's required, but also that communities can select local teams or teams with experience working in that community already and the match required. And then the implementation impact is well over $500 million to date. That's funding to make sure that these plans don't just collect dust on a shelf, that they're used to actually create change in communities. I think that's all we got.
But I think that's that kind of local participation has been key because even though it's hard to come up with that 20%, sometimes at least it puts skin in the game, and it's not just it's something that they have to embrace. But like I said, part of it's just peer pressure. Once people started to see the success and they saw what Sewanee did, and they're like, oh, we got to get in that program too. So it really kind of success begets success in terms of kind of collective regional pressure to figure out how to do one. And like I said, you saw from the green map, almost every major town or corridor in the city now has a CI plan. So we'd be glad. I think we might maybe Nathan have a few minutes if there were any questions or comments.
See where the referencing was the PD there. I could speculate on a couple different things that can be in the asterisk itself. There, something with that reference, what that exactly is.
Yeah, this is just a snippet from their website of what's been programmed in the current tip. I think it's preliminary engineering. Yes.
Can you speak a little bit about how disadvantaged and low income communities are involved in the development of these plans and eventual implementation?
Sure. So I think that's part of why, what Sadie mentioned, why the local control and RFPs and stuff, partly, so that a lot of the plans we've done had a specific outreach or component that was part of the LCI plan. That was about community engagement or community involvement or surveys or other things. So there was a kind of corollary, particularly in communities that felt like that was important. They specified that in their RFP that they were looking for additional supplemental help. But also, I think some of the scoring criteria for implementation and stuff, just like other many federal programs, there was, places where a lot of these projects actually were in disadvantaged communities because that was who had been overlooked and kind of had rundown corridors and other things. So I don't know if Chris, that answers your question, but it definitely was a consideration, but it was really kind of locally driven in terms of how they crafted and did the actual plan. ARC has a whole division that runs the LCI program, but they're more the technical advice and supplemental help and whatever. It's really the local jurisdiction that's day to day managing and soliciting and then applying for construction funding.
Yeah, and the annual call for applications to the ARC identifies different goals. So they can change a little bit every year. So right now, I think some of their main goals are affordable housing and environmental resiliency, which really have equity at the center of those goals as well. Jason.
Someone new's idea of how places should be rezoned, what the land should be two-story. All this stuff, you know, somebody had the same idea 30 years ago, so we have something, and we have this. Now it's just somebody new, a younger generation, coming, okay, now you need to change the rules to do that. Am I understanding this correctly? Is that kind of the gist of what this is?
I mean, yes and no. I think that's back to the, sorry to continue to beat the same horse, but like the local control of what the focus was. I think that it's fair to say that some of the communities really were very aggressive about wanting to look at zoning and allow mixed use or different types of uses, particularly, as you know, most typical transportation arteries, the zoning next to them is a commercial zoning. And so there was particularly an interest in relaxing that to allow housing as a allowable, not that it has to be there, but that's possible. And many, I know, Kentucky jurisdictions have been doing that. I wouldn't say that necessarily there was, you know, in every case, you know, a wholesale change to the land use and zoning, but that it definitely is part of the impetus, which is, it is, and I think the LCI program is cast as much as of a growth and management and economic development program as it is a transportation program, because the point was to not choke off all these places that already existed and had infrastructure serving them, and just to improve and enhance that infrastructure. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it wasn't, I don't think there was an edict that all the land use and zoning has to change, but a lot of communities did at least provide a little bit more flexibility in land use within these corridors.
Need to come in and start, I will say forcing, but here's money, you know, pushing. I mean, if the community wanted to do it, there was nothing to stop the community from doing it. Why did ARC have to step in and, hey, let's start doing this, here's money, you know, I just, there's a fine line, edicts, you know, versus what, you know, is actually, you know, wanting.
And I think that's what we were trying to say about incentive. This is not a very top down. It's not a top down program that you don't have to be an LCI. You don't have to, you know, and so I think that's been the success, to your point, is it is locally instigated. It is an incentive, and it is a big incentive because everybody needs transportation dollars and implementation help. And so the fact that you got a new pot does provide an incentive to say, okay, we should look at that. But I think if ARC had tried to go in and do the planning for everybody and say what it was, that wouldn't have been as successful. I think that's what we're trying to say. They had to find a balance where it was locally initiated and controlled and managed and defined. And I think in general, the program is really just about trying to leverage existing infrastructure that already exists, like I said. So it's just improving it for different types of modes. There's a lot of, like Perimeter was a place that had no sidewalks, but had malls and all kinds of office and restaurants and stuff, but it was difficult to, you had to drive. So they were just trying to figure out, okay, is there a way we can make this more connected? Yeah, you have another?
See what the urbanized boundary looks like in that area. Because STBD funds that come through a region are based on urbanized population. Yet it sounds like they're taking some of those funds and spending them outside the urbanized boundary. That's the case here.
Yeah, I think so. ARC, as I mentioned, is 11 counties technically, which is the more urbanized portion of the Atlanta region. We were actually talking about that, and you know, maybe Nathan or Brent or others who, I imagine this is a question that's emerging out of vibrant communities too, is Kentucky's a very diverse state. We have some very urban places and that have different issues and considerations and money and whatever. And I think a program like LCI in Kentucky necessarily, I don't know if this is your point, would have to acknowledge the differences between more rural areas that would have different objectives and different conditions than some of the major urbanized. LCI is obviously directed towards a relatively urbanized part of the state. But there's many parts of Georgia and of Kentucky, obviously, that might need a little bit different attitude and setup just because it's a different condition. They're, I don't believe they're spending it outside the MPO area. It's just a very big MPO. No, that the Georgia has regional development districts like Kentucky does. And that, in terms of kind of macro level planning, the Atlanta region, I think, is now defined as 20, but the MPO is 11 counties. So it's a subset of that larger region, and it's the MPO, just like we have MPOs. They just happen to have multiple counties and very large MPO because of how much interconnected commuting is happening in that core. And if you know, Georgia is very similar to Kentucky, has very small counties. There's 159 counties in Georgia. So
outside to those ex-urban counties.
and I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't believe they are. I was just trying to show you where the Atlanta region was as a reference, that you saw where on the map where the LCIs are, which are in the urbanized. Sorry. You see how concentrated they are in those original, in the MPO area. And I mean, it's a good question. Honestly, I don't administer the program. So, it might be a technical issue to see how did they handle. My guess is they got pressure because of the success of the program within the MPO area to have something that could be used. And maybe it's not STB. I don't know for sure. We'd have to look it up, but it's a good question in terms of equity and, fairness. But I don't know for sure if there's some areas where they had to come up with. I don't think they're taking money that was designated for one place and moving it to another. I think they probably came up with another way to do it if that was a restriction. Yeah.
As I would assume they're in this defined urban block. Just my assumption, but I have a good feeling that they would be.
Yeah. And I don't know how much time we have, but yeah.
Get last question.
Funded using SPG funds that are annually allocated. How much, do you know how much of the total annual allocation goes to this specific program and how much of it is still reserved for other projects outside of the area?
The planning portion of it each year is 2 million for the 80% federal portion of it. The programmed like tip projects varies. I think they're considered in a competitive fashion as any other project submission would be.
I think to your question, I don't know, but if you do the math, and it's been 500 million over 25 years, it's 40 to 50 million in any maximum year that they probably allocated. That is a lot of money, but I don't know. It's a good question. I don't know what ARC and MPO receives in some of these categories, but it's a very big number. This is a minority of the funding. It's by no means the primary program of the region. They still have CMAQ grants and all that stuff normally. They just decided to take a piece that they thought was reasonable just to create this incentive program. It's not the only program.
All right, everybody, All right, Jeremy, you there?
I'm here.
All righty. We're going to go ahead and switch over to you if you want to take the reins.
Are you able to see my screen?
Give me a second. I got to figure out these technical difficulties here. Just move you over here. Go ahead, Jeremy.
Okay, good morning, everybody. I was asked to give kind of an update on the last legislative session and discuss some of the multimodal funding that was made available through this last legislative session. So there was two main appropriations for multimodal funding. There was House Bill 1 that was amended by Senate Bill 91. This was an appropriation from the Budget Reserve Trust Fund. They ended up allocating $203 million in 24, $1.5 billion in fiscal year 25, and $1 billion in fiscal 26. Of that, there was three appropriations for river ports, and there was two appropriations for railroads. And we also had House Bill 265, which is just the transportation cabinet's budget. But within that, there was also one appropriation for railroads and one for river ports. And I'll kind of go over each one of those. So from House Bill 1, the first appropriation for river ports was $3.5 million for the Paducah Riverport West. This is an appropriation to them to develop a new riverport to the west of their current location. Their current location is landlocked, and so this facility would allow them to grow, put in new docks, and have closer access to rail. And so the $3.5 million will be going from the transportation cabinet to Paducah Riverport for this Riverport West project to mainly do all of their design work, get it to 90% completion, and then do all of their, geotechnical investigations, muscle surveys, environmental NEPA processes. So this was the first appropriation. We've already sent the contract to Paducah Riverport, and it's been signed by them, and it's within the cabinet now for final signatures for this project. The next appropriation from House Bill 1 was line item 225. This was $7.5 million in each fiscal year to our public river ports. We have 10 public river ports, and so each public river port is allocated $750,000 to do capital projects. There was a carve out to allow the West Kentucky Regional Riverport Authority up to $250,000 of that for archaeological activities. But the rest of the projects are all supposed to be for construction projects. So like I said, there's $750,000 for each public riverport authority. There is no match required. So with these projects, we actually advertised the projects. They've been, the riverports submitted applications to the Transportation Cabinet to for how they wanted to use their funds, and then all of those applications were reviewed by the Water Transportation Advisory Board just to make a determination upon whether or not they were eligible projects. Now, like I said, the projects could be for, and the way it's worded is for new construction, major replacement or repair projects, including but not limited to improvement of docks, wharves, equipment, port buildings, storage facilities, roads and railroads to facilitate the flow of commerce through the port, other on-site improvements, and related professional services. So it can't be routine operations, maintenance, repair activities, but it was for major capital projects. So the Riverport submitted their applications on June 7th. The advisory board met on the 24th to review and recommend projects, and the secretary approved 8 of the projects on July 8th. So I'm going to quickly go over what projects the secretary approved. These are the 8 projects. We ended up awarding $5 million of the $7.5 million, and I'll go over each of these projects. Eddyville Riverport was awarded $750,000. They're going to install new dolphins. Essentially, dolphins are essentially like the old hitching posts of the West, where people would tie up their horses. These are essentially hitching posts for barges. As the river ports are loading or unloading barges, they needed a place to store them. So you can see in this light blue area in the water, this will be an area where the Eddyville is going to install some dolphins to allow them to tie up barges as they're working them. So that was the first project awarded. The second project was to Henderson County Riverport Authority. They're awarded $750,000 for an electric material handler project. Their current dock is going to be, they have a conveyor belt system that's going to be removed, and they're going to replace it with a electric material handler, which is the green item in the right. And that's for loading and unloading barges. The next project was Hickman Fulton County Riverport Authority. They were awarded $481,000 for a dock cell repair project. The dolphins, as I said, are kind of the hitching posts. The mooring cells kind of that you see here circled, these are what the barges actually tie up to as they're loading and unloading. And they're made of plate steel and filled with ballast. And over time they get cracked, they get rust areas, and the ballast essentially falls out and they lose their structural stability. So this project will actually go through, repair a lot of that, put bands around it to reinforce them, and refill them with ballast. Hickman Fulton County also was awarded $268,000 for a new front-end loader. If you're not familiar with port operations, these are used extensively for loading and unloading of barges. They can have attachments for moving, as you see in the picture on the left. They have forks on them so they can move steel coils, or they can have a bucket for moving larger aggregates. So they are trying to replace a 2003 version of their loader with a new one on a statewide master agreement. So they were awarded $268,000 for this project. Louisville Riverport Authority was awarded $700,000. This is their gantry crane. It's 35 years old. A lot of the electric components, the controls of it, are no longer functional. And so when they have to repair it, it takes a lot more money. So they're actually going to rewire the entire electrical system, the command, control, the cab, and the braking system to make this more functional. So they were awarded $700,000 toward that project. Maysville Mason County Riverport Authority, they were awarded $622,000. They are going to purchase a front-end loader and then these conveyor stackers to allow them to move materials around their port. They are one of our developing ports, and so they actually have a tenant that they're going to be able to use this for. So we're excited that they're moving from kind of one of our developing ports to one of our more active ports with this project. Owensboro Riverport Authority was awarded $750,000. They recently purchased this warehouse that was on their property, but it was leased out. So they recently purchased back this warehouse. They've done a lot of work on the warehouse, but this project, the $750,000, will actually replace the electrical system in the building, as well as add this overhangs area to allow for loading in inclement weather. So that is what they were awarded the full $750,000 for this project. And then last but not least, Paducah McCracken County Riverport Authority, they were awarded $750,000, essentially for the same thing as Hickman. They're going to be doing an assessment of all of their mooring cells to decide what repairs need to be made to their mooring cells. And then the next part of the phase of the project would actually be going in and doing the repairs to stabilize those mooring cells. So the next appropriation from House Bill 1 was $1.3 million to Owensboro Riverport. This was line item 226. This is essentially to construct an Owensboro Riverport waterline loop. House Bill 1 had a lot of projects in there for various purposes, whether it's drinking water. There were some broadband projects. There was some projects for transportation. There's projects for convention centers. What we understand is that Owensboro Municipal Utilities approached their legislator about getting an appropriation, and the legislator decided to do it, but they did it through the Riverport Authority. So this will flow through the transportation cabinet, but it's going to be essentially a water line project with Owensboro Municipal Utilities to expand the water service in that area. So we're essentially going to be a pass-through to Owensboro Municipal Utilities through the Port Authority. Also in House Bill 1 for rail, there was $7.5 million in line item 229. This is for what they call the Short Line Infrastructure Preservation Pilot Project. So some of the details about that essentially provides $7.5 million in each fiscal year This is for class 2 and class 3 railroads. So these are the smaller ones like Paducah and Louisville, RJ Corman, TTI, Tenkin, not the big ones like CSX Norfolk Southern, but our class 2 and class 3 railroads to preserve and enhance our existing rail lines and corridors. Some of the goals from the program that were in the legislation is to retain existing rail served industries and attract new industries and preserve and modernize Kentucky's rail system. So the funds from this program can be used for the purpose of equipment, construction, reconstruction, improvement, or rehabilitation of rail facilities, or engineering work associated with capital projects. This one does require a 50-50 match. And legislation says that there's not a single project that can receive more than $2 million in the grant funds. With this program, the application has been developed, the guidance document has been developed, and then we're hoping to issue the call for projects in the next couple days. And then the railroads would have 30 days to submit an application, and the cabinet would review and select projects for award. The next item was line item 230. This is another $7.5 million in each fiscal year for the Industrial Access and Safety Improvement Program. Some of the details on this one, the cabinet is supposed to coordinate with the Economic Development Cabinet, mainly because of the purpose behind these funds, but they're $7.5 million in each fiscal year. These also require a 50-50 match. No single project, again, can receive more than $2 million in the grant funds. They also added the provision that no one entity can receive more than 25% of the total program's funds in a fiscal year. Now, this program is open to all railroads, class 1, 2, and 3, any railroad authority, port authority, any rail served industry, as well as industrial and economic development authority boards. So this is going to have a whole lot more potential applicants, whereas with the short line fund, that's just the class 2 and class 3s. I think there are 16 of those in the state. That's all that can apply. In this program, anybody that owns a rail spur essentially can apply for these funds. And the purpose of these funds is to expand rail access, enhance the marketability of available industrial sites, increase job creation and capital investment, and increase safety. Now, funds from these projects can be used for equipment, construction, reconstruction, improvement, rehabilitation of rail facilities, or engineering work associated with capital projects. So this one requires the cabinet to work with economic development, because the metric on which the projects are to be scored is how well they increase economic development. That is not really something that the Transportation Cabinet does, is make assessments about economic development. So we're going to be partnering with the Economic Development Cabinet to put this program together, to administer this, as well as to rank and score potential projects. So we're still working with economic development on standing up this program, but this is one that has received quite a bit of attention from industries because of the availability to anyone that owns a rail spur. That was pretty much it from House Bill 1. Within the Transportation Cabinet's budget, House Bill 265, there was the two appropriations. The first one is for the Kentucky Rail Crossing Improvement Program. This is a normal program that we get funding for every fiscal year. As in past years, we have $1.6 million in each fiscal year. This program requires an 80-20 match. So the locals have to come up with 20%. This is a program open to any public at-grade crossing. So whether that is a city, county street, a state route, anything that has a public at-grade crossing can apply for these funds. And there's three types of projects that can be funded through this program. The first is rehabilitating the crossing, which is replacing the surface to make it a smoother crossing. The second is crossing safety equipment improvements, whether that's adding gates, bells, whistles, or upgrading the gates, bells, and whistles at the crossing. Those are eligible projects. The third is removal of obstructive vegetation. This is for crossings that do not have gates or bells or whistles, that just have the standard crossbucks, that we will pay for the vegetation to be removed on all sides of the crossing to allow better visibility of trains approaching the crossing, as well as for trains seeing traffic approaching. In discussions with our railroads, because obviously we received these three appropriations for the short line, the industrial access, and for these grade crossing funds, the railroads indicated that the short line funds were the priority. So we're focusing on getting those stood up, and then focus on the industrial access. These are obviously important to the railroads in getting done, but they were the least important. So we're going to issue the call for these probably in the fall. The last appropriation was also in House Bill 265, which is the Transportation Cabinet's budget. This is $500,000 for our Kentucky Riverport Improvement Program. This is the program that we've had in the past where the railroads or the riverports can apply for. In the past, it was 50-50 funding. This year, it has actually switched to 80-20 funding. But there's $500,000 in each fiscal year, 80-20 match. Eligible projects are for dredging or improving riverport facilities, infrastructure, or critical material handling equipment. So at the same time that we issued the call for the $7.5 million for our river ports, we also issued the call for these applications. So applications for this program were due June 7th. The Water Transportation Advisory Board met on June 24th to review and recommend projects to the Secretary. The Secretary ended up approving 8 of the projects on July 8th. So I'll go through those projects quickly. Again, it was $500,000 that was awarded to 8 projects, and I'll go over those real quick. The first one, Henderson County Riverport Authority, was awarded $27,000 for a 12,000-pound forklift. Forklifts are used heavily for moving funds. Now, the $27,000 doesn't seem like a lot, but it was actually the last bit of money that the advisory board had to award. And so while they had asked for $96,000, the board only had $27,000 left after awarding all the other projects, so they agreed to take the $27,000. So this one is not necessarily an 80-20. The next project that was awarded was again Henderson County Riverport Authority. This is for their 15,000-pound forklift. Again, riverports have fleets of forklifts for moving goods around their ports of different sizes, whether they're 9,000-pound or 15,000-pound or even 25,000-pound forklifts. And so replacing these is critical for ports to effectively move goods. And so Henderson Riverport Authority was awarded $95,000 toward their 15,000-pound forklift replacement project. Hickman Fulton County Riverport Authority was awarded $65,000 to dredge material. Dredging is essentially bringing in a big vacuum that sucks up sand and sediment from the bottom of the river to make it deeper. Where this port is located in Elvis Star Harbor, as you can see, it is a slackwater harbor, so it constantly receives sediment from the Mississippi River, and so they have to be dredged every single year. And the Corps comes in and dredges the main navigational channel, and so the Riverport Authority provides a little bit more money for the dredge to come and help dredge out where their port operates at. So it's actually critical for them to be able to stay in operation to have this dredging done every year. So they were awarded $65,000 for their dredging project. Hickman Riverport was also awarded $19,000 for a spreader bar and coil hooks project. You can see in the picture here, this is a large contraption that attaches to their crane, and they can swing this into a barge, and it will actually scoop up 4 big coils of steel hooks or steel coils of coils of steel or aluminum, and that's how they move them on and off of barges, is using this spreader bar. And so the one that they have is getting up there in years, and so this project will actually replace that with a newer, more adjustable one, because sometimes the coil dimensions differ from material to material, and so the new one will allow them to adjust the hooks on there to be able to accommodate different materials. Louisville Riverport Authority was awarded $65,000 for a new skid steer. Skid steers are used obviously on the ports for moving a lot of goods around, and then when they bring barges in to unload them, after the cranes have kind of picked up as much as they can, they'll actually swing a bobcat into the barge, and the bobcat will kind of move all the material into a central pile that the crane can continue to move the goods around and offload them. So these skid steers are critical for moving goods on a port, and so Louisville Riverport Authority was awarded $65,000 to replace theirs that is getting up in years. Owensboro Riverport Authority was awarded $152,000 for a loadout project. This is you can see in the aerial photo kind of in front of the white dome there. This is an area that the port uses for loading and unloading goods, and currently it's just gravel. And so when it gets a lot of rain, it washes out. The materials get compromised because it gets mud all over them. So they actually have to spend a lot of time washing off their materials. So this project will actually add concrete to their low road loadout area to more efficiently move their goods. Paducah McCracken County Riverport Authority was awarded $28,000 for a trailer. Because, like I said earlier, they are landlocked. They have their warehouses are not very close to where their loadout area is. And so the cranes have to put the materials on trailers and then move them to the warehouses. And the port does not own a trailer. They have to rent one. And quite often the trailer is not available for rent. And so they're not able to move products. So this project will actually allow them to purchase a trailer to move their goods to and from the port more efficiently. And then the last one was Paducah McCracken County was also awarded $46,000 to replace their Bobcat. Again, their Bobcat is up there in years and is aging, and so their new project will replace the Bobcat shown in the pictures with a newer, more modern version. Those were the funds, kind of like I said, high level that were awarded through the recent legislative session. The ones that I would say are going to impact you all the most is going to be the industrial access rail funds, because when we develop that program and send out the call for projects, those are going to be we're going to rely on you all and your local knowledge to forward that call for projects to industries you know of that have rail access, that want rail access, to allow them to let them know that we've got this call for project out there. The second one obviously is going to be the rail crossing improvement program. Again, that is open to any city, state, county, road. The city, states, or county can even apply for the funds, or even the highway districts can apply for the funds to do the projects as long as the railroad has signed off on doing the project. Obviously, we can't do projects without the railroad's permission because the crossing is technically their property, but it does not require the railroad to actually do the application for the funds. The applicant can be a city or county. We've had highway districts have applied in the past. So again, when it comes time for these calls for projects to go out, we're going to rely on you all to help forward that out. If you're aware of any crossings that need work for, like I said, city, county, or state routes, to really help put out the word that these grant funds are available. The rest of the funds, like I said,
Jeremy, I got to cut you off. We're running
Okay.
behind. You did an amazing job getting a lot of material through in that short amount of time. We got to keep the schedule going.
Sure.
And again, Jeremy filled in for us last minute, so I really appreciate that to you, Jeremy. I hated to cut you off, but
Oh, that's fine.
I keep
I'm done.
things on schedule. Everybody, if you have a question for Jeremy, if you're virtual, drop it in the chat. If you're in person, come up to me and I'll drop it in the chat, and Jeremy can answer any of the questions through the chat to kind of keep us going. So that being said, let's take a 10-minute break and come back at 10:35, and we'll have our next presenter. Thanks, Jeremy.
Thanks.
All right, folks. If you can start wrapping your conversations up and get to your seats so we can have another great presentation. If you're in the virtual realm, hopefully you're back and we'll have Dr. Kirk presenting in the near future. So don't make me start calling names out. Casey. All right. Gotta get my bio.
You don't need to buy it. Yeah.
There's people, you're notorious for gonna be known. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Next presenter is Adam Kirk, or Dr. Adam Kirk. He's received his bachelor's degree and PhD in civil engineering from the University of Kentucky, his master's degree in transportation engineering and planning from the University of Washington. Adam has worked as consultant transportation planner and engineer and as the transportation engineer for local planning and zoning agencies. He currently serves as the local government outreach engineer at the technology transfer program at the University of Kentucky, where he provides on-call engineering assistance to local governments. Adam is an expert in traffic safety and operational safety impacts of geometric design. He uses this expertise to assist agencies in developing safety plans and identifying innovative treatments to safety and operational needs. Adam is a registered professional engineer in Kentucky. So everybody welcome, please welcome Adam Kirk. Come on up, sir. I got to start this over. Let's see.
Sorry, halfway through.
No, all right.
We're good. Do we need to run anything on Teams or you?
No, you're good. You're
Okay.
set up. Well,
Great.
wait. You're right. I said, everybody, please forgive I got to share the screen, right? All right. Jeff, send me a text if it's all messed up. All right.
But thanks, Nathan. Appreciate everybody having me here today. My name is Adam Kirk, and I work at the University of Kentucky Transportation Center in the Technology Transfer Program. Not speaking today, but responsible for everything that we're doing here is Martha Horseman. She's here to make sure that I don't speak out of turn. But we're going to talk today about our Safe Streets and Roads for All program. We were here, I think, 2 years ago when we initially had gone through the application process and just wanted to give an update on where we are at this point. It seems like maybe we're not that far because, the application process and getting all the agreements in place took a while, but we're finally kind of on that road. So we want to provide an update and give an idea of where we've been and then still where we're going. So we're going to go through just a real brief overview because I know a lot of people say, what's the University of Kentucky doing here or who's T2? So give a brief overview of what we do. We'll talk a little bit about our technical assistance and outreach that we do within our program, and then get into the Safe Streets and Roads for All. Like I said, kind of an overview of where we've been. We've also got quite a few of our ed transportation planners who are working actively with us on that program. So if you have any questions about how it's really going, you can grab them afterwards as well. So first, how do you know us? Like I said, we're with the University of Kentucky. If you work at the transportation cabinet, you may know us more as the Kentucky Transportation Center. So the Kentucky Transportation Center was originally the research division as part of the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet. I always say that we were housed on the University of Kentucky campus and we got to hanging out with too many professors. So they finally said, we don't want to deal with them. But back in, I think, 81, a lot of people went to work on Friday as a transportation cabinet employee and then came back to work on Monday as a University of Kentucky employee. So we've had a strong relationship through the center for years now. The technology transfer program is one of the divisions underneath the Kentucky Transportation Center. We primarily work with local governments, providing technical assistance and training for those. So we go by the name T2. Outside of Kentucky, we're also known as Kentucky LTAP. So The LTAP, or the Local Technical Assistance Program, is a federally funded program through FHWA to provide services to local governments, and the Technology Transfer Program serves in that role as well. And so Martha Horseman is the director of our Kentucky LTAP and recent past president of the National LTAP organization. So we do a lot of things. I know when we started this out and we started working with the Division of Planning, the Technology Transfer Program had not worked with the Division of Planning a while. We didn't really know what we did, so I kind of want to give you an idea of all that we got as well. Some of the things that we do, you may primarily know us from our training. We do a lot of training, especially with the HT series. We have a Road Scholar, Road Master program that teaches a lot of our road departments, supervisors, and road workers on our local governments. We put out publications. You may receive our link newsletter. It's a quarterly newsletter that comes out. If not, you go to our website and you can sign up for it, and we'll be happy to send you one. And we also publish technical resources, which we've taken to call tap-it sheets that you can receive and download off of our website as well. We run an equipment loan program for local governments, and that's where you might have a need for a piece of equipment, such as a retroreflectometer. It might be expensive. You might not need it all the time, and we'll run a loan program so that we purchase it and loan it out to different local agencies as they need it. And so they don't have to, every agency doesn't have to invest on their own. What I want to primarily talk about today, though, is our technical assistance program. The technical assistance program kind of pulls together a lot of the training, and if you need one-on-one assistance for some of those areas, we provide that as well. So the Local Technical Assistance Program, or LTAP, I said this is the official federal program, assists local highway agencies to meet and maintain their roadways. And oftentimes what we do is as we're housed at the transportation center, we take a lot of the research that is being done at the transportation center that's usually coming to the transportation cabinet, and we try and funnel that down to the local agencies as well. We also serve as kind of that liaison between the transportation cabinet and some of those local agencies to make sure that they are aware of and using the standards and specifications that the cabinet's developed, so we don't have 120 different counties, 430 plus cities that are developing their own standards and their own practices, since that's already kind of been established here. So we try and push that technology and those best practices down to those local agencies. A couple of programs that we run through our technical assistance is the first one's the Safety Circuit Rider program. The Safety Circuit Rider program started back in about 2004. I always want to say it's older than that, but I think it's around 2004. Kentucky was one of the first states in the nation with the Safety Circuit Rider program. And it started as a pilot through the Federal Highway Administration, where they said, let's provide a resource in each state so that if our local agencies have safety needs, that we've got somebody that can go out there and help them. And so what we do with our Safety Circuit Rider program is we're a free technical resource again. So we have experts. We call ourselves experts, but if we don't know the answer, we just phone somebody who does. We have experts at the university in transportation safety. And so if an agency has a question, they can call us at any time, and we can either help them over the phone, we can go out and research and visit those sites and identify solutions for them. We also have 6 focus counties a year that we select, and we provide training for them. We also do road safety assessments or road safety audits on 2 roadways that are selected by the local agency. And then this is conducted through the HSIP program, where they fund improvements through those. That program kind of moved into the local road safety plan. Again, this is a pilot project from FHWA, where we said, instead of doing 2 roads, a year where we're, putting improvements, low cost safety improvements on, say, 2 miles a year in 6 counties, what if we looked at all of the roadways within that county? So this is a data-driven process where we take that same low-cost systemic measures that we have from the Safety Circuit Rider program and apply those county-wide. One of the things that we'll talk about a little bit in here is that this is data-driven. And if you look at a lot of our county road system, we've got a lot of mileage of road. And so we try to say, how do we select these roadways that are not just, say, county driveways, where you've got one house or resident at the end of that road, but where the traffic is, where the crashes are occurring. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. As we started moving forward into the local road safety plans, at the same time, this is when, through the bipartisan infrastructure law, grant funding was come out for the Safe Streets and Roads for All. So if you know anything about that program, it's $1 billion of funding per year for 5 years, and it goes direct to local agencies. When we started to look at the initiatives within the local road safety plan, and we started to look at the aims of the Safe Streets and Roads for All program, we said, we can go from, putting about $30,000 out to each county through the Safety Circuit Rider program. We started to look at improvements through Highway Safety Improvement Program for our local road safety plans, which ended up about $1 million a year. And then we look at a funding source of $1 billion a year. And so we've gone from scratching the surface of our worst roads to saying, now here's a funding source and a plan that will allow us not only to get those higher roads, but really to elevate the entire local road system. And so that's the goal that we had when we looked at this. And last time we were here, we talked a lot about kind of the efforts we put together with developing these consortiums. And so what we looked at is we partnered with I think 10 different ads. Within those ads, the transportation planners that are here reached out to those local communities and got everybody on board, and we submitted a multi-agency application for what's now known as planning grants, but is previously known as Safety Action Plan Awards. And so you can see the map here. The dark navy is the first year awards, which was supported by those ads. KIPTA and Louisville area applied kind of independently. And then in the last round, Bluegrass ad pursued and was awarded a planning grant as well. So very successful partnership in between the ads, also significant support from the Division of Planning here at KYTC, as well as out of the Secretary's office in local planning, where KYTC provided the 20% local match for those awards as well. And that kind of helped all those pieces come together. So the overall idea, championed by ads, and because they had that direct infrastructure and direct relationship with those local communities, technical analysis and support by T2 or Kentucky LTAP. And we're at the stage where we're using the local agencies to go out and collect data on those roadways. So really, everybody involved in this project has a key piece in it, from the local agencies collecting data on those roads, the ads coordinating and providing all of the communication for that, and then the technical support by UK. And so this is really allows those local agencies to be invested in the development of the plan, as opposed to just sending it off to a consultant saying, to put us a plan together. So, real quick, on what can we do with the plan, because this was one of the first questions we kind of had when we went to the counties and said, we want to develop a safety plan. They said, well, what can we do? The first thing is that it can get you more funding. So not only does the Safe Streets and Roads for All program have implementation funds as well, there are also other federal programs that require that improvements be identified in a plan. But then there's also Highway Safety Improvement Program funds that have been allocated or set aside for local road improvements as well. And what we've also seen is just within our own project. And this is one of the things that Tom said from the very beginning is that having this plan, doing the analysis and putting the data behind it is going to allow us to identify better projects through our regular routine planning, identify better projects through the shift analysis. And then finally, what we've seen from other counties that have implemented local road safety plans is it just helps prioritize your regular maintenance activities better. If every day you know you're going to go out, you're going to be trimming vegetation, you're going to be clearing drainage, you're going to be repairing those roads, the safety action plan allows you to know where am I going to get the most bang for my buck if I go out there and put those roadway in. So that's what we see the benefit is. The next is, what's in a local road safety plan? So there's three primary components that are required for a safety plan, and that's that it's got to have crash analysis, it's got to be data driven. It has to identify specific strategic safety projects. So this can't just be we want to improve safety within our community, but to identify specific projects and the data behind those. And then it needs to be completed within the last 5 years. So using that recent crash data, those are required elements. There are then, to be eligible for federal funding, there's 6 additional elements, and you've got to meet at least 4 of those to meet the federal requirements. And so that is having the community adopt a Vision Zero statement where they say that, having deaths and serious injuries on this roadway are unacceptable. It has to be task force driven. So again, this needs to have the input of the community leaders and making sure that we're addressing community problems and that this truly is a local road safety plan, not just a one size fits all blanket. Look at engaging the public. And then, as you know, with this administration, really looking at equity and making sure that how can we address equity when we get into our safety considerations. And this is probably the one, I think it might be an afterthought for a lot, but it's probably the one I'm most excited about. But looking at an assessment of policies. And when we look at our policies and how we do business, that's when we can really get ahead and prevent future problems as opposed to trying to address the problems we've got now. And as you look at Kentucky, as we're a developing state where we consider ourselves to be rural, but a lot of our areas we're really starting to see that urban development pushing out. Getting ahead of that and getting those policies in place can have a huge impact and make sure that our roadways can support that development in the future. And then finally, making sure that we have performance measures in place that we can evaluate whether the plan's working. And so then as we continue these plans and we continue to revisit those, is the strategies we had before being effective? And do we need to go back and reevaluate those? So this is our overall project tasks. One of the ones that we says there's a whole lot of agreements to be put in place when you're looking at federal programs. So we had not only federal agreements that we were dealing with because this was a multi-jurisdictional application, and we had a lot of people put in here. We also had agreements in place for each of the local communities. We had agreements in place between those communities and KYTC in order to receive that matching funds. And then we also had agreements in place between the area development districts and UK. So we had a lot of paperwork before we could get to the meat of solving our safety problems. And so we looked at crash analysis, data collection, identifying our projects, and then kind of going down through that list. So one of the things when we look at our crash analysis, what we have been preparing at UK and been working on is just providing crash summaries of what goes on our county roadways. Whereas we've got publicly available data and we've got some of the best crash data in the nation in Kentucky, making that accessible and helping interpret what does it say, summarizing that data. So we've been preparing crash summaries, kind of just showing what it looks like, what types of crashes are we having, what are the contributing factors to that. and then providing rankings of roadways based on the crashes. So where are crashes occurring at? So one of the things that we're doing with that crash data, and this is kind of where we're at now, is saying we've got a lot of miles of roads. We've got 2 times as many locally owned roadways as we do state maintained roads. So how do we narrow that list down to say what improvements are we going to put in place? And so we're developing what we originally had called our county collector system, and now we're referring to as our focus roadways. And what we're doing with our focus roadways is we're looking at our estimated traffic volume or surrogates for estimated traffic volumes, looking at the importance of that roadway in the network, and then also looking at our injury and fatal crashes. I know we're running a little bit short on time, but I want to spend a little bit of time on this because one of our biggest challenges on our local system is we don't have roadway data. We don't know how much traffic is on that roadway. We don't know how wide the roadway is. We don't know a lot of things. We only collect that data for collector roadways and above on our functional classification system. And we only have about 50 miles of collector roads on that local system. So we don't have a lot of data. We don't have ADTs. What we used to kind of sort this out is we used our HERE probe data. And so if anybody's ever heard of the HERE probe data, we use it a lot for speed and congestion measures, but it also gives us a raw count of how many probe vehicles went down that roadway. And so what the data set's based on, it used to be based on a lot of freight traffic. So if we had trucks that were using GPS data as they went down that roadway network, we would have probe data. Some navigational systems would provide that. But the main source of data now is if you sign up for insurance and they say, let's put a tracking device in your car, let's put this app on your vehicle so we can monitor your driving habits. That's also tracking where you're going. It knows what roads you're on. And so that data is also being incorporated into the HERE data set. So we've got a lot of data points, not of every vehicle that goes down that roadway, but it gives us a pretty good idea of which roads are more heavily traveled than others. So we're using that HERE data set, and we're also using what we're calling a network criticality measure. And that network criticality measure looks at the full spectrum of origin destination points in a county or in the state and says, how many times do I need to cross through this roadway in order to get there? So if I've got a county road that's a dead end road, I'm going to have a very low criticality score. If I've got a roadway that connects 2 state routes or connects 2 major cities, I'm going to have a really high criticality score because it's critical to meeting that origin destination pair. So that's allowed us to look at what our exposure is, and then we compare that with our high injury and fatal crashes, and we start to order our roadways. What we've seen, and this is pretty consistent. The first time we ran it, we said that's pretty neat. Then we ran it for 120 counties. And what we see is about 95% of our injury and fatal crashes typically occurs on about 20% of our local roadways. So that's critical to when we look at how do we evaluate these roads. If you've got a county with 500 miles of road, now we don't have to look at 500 miles. We can say, well, let's focus on 100 miles of road. If we're up in Kenton County, we've got 100 miles of road, we're able to limit that to about 20 miles. And if we can address that 20 miles of roadway with strategic safety projects, we can address the majority of our fatal and injury crashes that are occurring on that local road system. So that's really helped us as we've gone through here and done it. So this is an example. This is the first time we did this in Boyle County. This was done with a qualitative rating by county officials. And like I said, now we're starting to find these additional data sources like our HERE data, our network criticality, so we can automate this process as opposed to having to visit with each individual county as we go through it. So this is our data collection. So we're kicking off, or just finished our data collection training. So we've prepared we've prepared a Survey 123 app that identifies what we're looking for, and then we provided a manual and a training that goes along with it in order to capture these major critical elements on our roadway so that we can identify where they are and then start to identify our projects through there. Once that's done, how much time ago? 5 minutes. Once that's done, we're really going to be focusing on our systemic measures. We realize that when you look at the amount of miles of roadway, even if we've got 20 miles or 100 miles of road that we need to address with strategic safety projects, we don't have enough money to do major projects on all of those roadways. So we're looking at our low cost systemic safety measures to where if we have a run off the road vehicle problem in our county, what are the measures that I can put throughout that entire county system, whether it be striping, improved signing, and we're looking to the proven safety countermeasures that are put out by Federal Highway Administration to help us identify those improvements. And then we also have, as I mentioned before, technical resources that are being developed in-house at T2 that provide additional guidance. So we can say if you have a curve signing problem where you need to sign your horizontal curves, here's a summary of basically what the MUTCD recommends. You have this, and then you can also come to us for technical assistance on something that falls outside of those normal bounds through there. So we also have some sample, when we look at the individual elements, sample Vision Zero statements we can provide to the counties to adopt. When we're looking at public engagement, which is our next step along this process, what we're looking at is using online surveys as well as interactive mapping. So if somebody has a safety concern, they can go to that map through an online survey and say, I almost hit a kid playing in the street here, or I almost ran into this tree at this location. So integrating that interactive mapping with this. I understand that there are constraints and it's not ideal to do it completely online, but if you look at the amount of counties that we are working with at this point, it's probably the best way to get any kind of input. So we're currently working with 85 counties. We're going to be talking to Doug later on this afternoon or this morning, trying to expand it and get those last couple of area development districts in as well. So looking at our engagement, the equity analysis, this is really becoming critical when you look at a lot of our rural communities and you look at this focus from USDOT on equity. Oftentimes we may think, well, that doesn't apply to us. But if you look at Kentucky, a large portion of our communities are disadvantaged communities. What that means is that they don't have good access to healthcare. They don't have good access to jobs. They don't have good access to transportation facilities. And so when we look at, a roadway and we say this roadway has a safety problem and it may be lower on our list, but if that's the only road we've got in and out of a community, we're going to bring that up higher on the list and make it a more of a priority so that we can have a safe way in and out of that community as we go forward. Like I said, 6 and 7, we're going to be looking at policies. One of the things that I always say is that as we are in a growing community, if we can put in minimum roadway standards so that we're not building additional communities, we're not building businesses that are accessing off of a 12-foot wide road, because that's the main link in and out of the community. So looking to get ahead of some of these problems as we go through here. So this is kind of what our safety action plan looks like. I think we might have shared this before. What we're hoping to do with our regional or AD safety action plan is we will have our crash analysis, we'll have our countermeasures for each of the areas, and then individual improvement lists or prioritized improvement lists for each of those counties and cities that are participating. So we'll have our regional plan, and then if an individual community wants to make their own plan, they can pull out those individual pieces from that regional plan and make a individual community plan. So that's the idea behind this, so that they'll then be able to use that to direct their maintenance forces. They'll also be able to use that if they want to pursue independent funding on their own. This is kind of an updated graph kind of showing where you're from, and I'm not going to go through it all. some of the resources that we offer in terms of our crash summaries, some of the crash mapping that we're hoping to go live. And like I said, we're trying to push a lot of our resources online, both to help us track through these projects, as well as to provide access of our focus roadways so that we can easily review those and streamline those processes as we go forward. So if you have any questions, you can always ask Martha. She's happy to do that. Or if she can't answer it, I'll do that as well. So does anybody have any questions at all? Yes, ma'am. Yes. So number one, we're really limiting ours to county roadways when we're talking about that. The vast majority of those are rural. The vast majority of those are 2 lanes. The vast majority of those are 55 miles per hour. Once we go beyond that, we don't have a lot of data on that local road system. So, if you look at how many curves do we have, or, we, on the highway performance monitoring system, the HPMS, we categorize class ABC curves. We don't have that information. So, once we've narrowed this down, this is when we're starting to get into, we're collecting roadway information, which is as basic as what's our roadway width on these roadways, what is our roadside hazard rating on that roadway, so we can have a more comprehensive idea of what that road looks like. And then we're also looking at what are other measures we can do. So we're looking at a sinusoidal evaluation of a road, which evaluates how curvy it is. We're able to then run analysis on centerline data to see, what categorize the types of curves. So we're trying to narrow that data set down, and now we're collecting that data so that we can do exactly that and say, what are the characteristics of these roadways that seem to predispose it or increase the risk. But that's really been the challenge with local road plans, is that kind of information, that kind of data is largely absent. We don't really know how much traffic's on that road to start with. The focus is on locally maintained roads. Is because, and that was the same focus with the local road safety plans, because it is what can that county manage and operate. Safe Streets and Roads for All funding is available for both state and local. What we have directed the communities and the ads for is if there is an exceptional state road that is critical to the community, that maybe, it's important to the community as a priority, but it may not rank high on that statewide list, is we can include that in the plan so that it can kind of increase the standing, so to speak, when we go for further analysis. But the majority of the focus is on those locally owned roads, because that is the local plan and what they can most affect with their resources.
Great questions, Ken. Good job, Al. Appreciate it, man.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Brent and Casey, if you want to come on up. I was looking through Adam's Boone County safety plan. I thought he did a really good job with it. Let's see. Figure this out again. Let's see if I can do that. So we're obviously crunched for time. So, and most of us know who these individuals are. So I'm not going to go through the full blown formal introduction, but Casey Smith with District 7, Planning, so the Transportation Supervisor Planner, is going to talk, as well as Brent Swager, who works in my branch, in the SPAC branch, and does a lot of the small urban area studies. They're going to talk about the one they recently completed in Richmond and what they got out of it. So I'm going to pass it over to these folks. You're sharing your screen. I think the clicker should work. All righty. Pass it over, guys. Thank you.
I'm unmuted, right?
I hope so.
Okay, yeah, it says right there. Okay. All right, well, thanks, Nathan. I'm sure the person who wrote up my bio is going to be very disappointed to hear that he didn't get to read it. So, but yeah, no, this is a study that we have done with Stantec. It's a West Richmond small urban area study. Brett and I, of course, are very happy to present this presentation. I think it's about maybe the fifth time that we've presented it already. So this should be the best version of it yet, or at least you would think it would be. But yeah, this was not only just a transportation study. It was also an evaluation of the future land use and how it does affect the transportation needs for in the future and even in the long term. And even though it was a state administered type study, yeah, there's also workings and collaboration with our local entities, our local partners, in addressing some of the things that they could take on their end. So I think it was a pretty good coordination effort with them. And this is really the study area that we were looking at. The conversation about this study really originated out of a conversation that we had with Representative Fraser Gordon over in Madison County. And much of the conversation was actually over the southbound exit ramp. You'll see there's Kentucky 876, that southbound exit ramp, which is Barnes Mill Road. There's a lot of focus on that area due to traffic backing up onto the interstate, as well as the slow moving traffic on Barnes Mill. But it really, from the initial conversations that we had about this study, it has really expanded. As you see within the red areas, the entire study area, which included Barnes Mill Road over to the south, Crutcher Pike to the west, Tates Creek to the north, Goggin Lane over to the east, which is a locally maintained roadway, as well as Jacks Creek and I-75. So in a total area of about 10,000 to 11,000 acres that we were looking at. So before we began the study, actually Brent and I, we went out to meet the staff of the county and city planning commissions. They are completely separate commissions, and meeting Barnes Mill. You know, we also need to be looking at what is coming in the future. And these are two comprehensive plans. They do, Richmond and Madison County, they don't share or do a combined comprehensive plan. They are separate. And over on the left side, you'll see is the Vision Richmond future land use map, where it's got multi-use areas, industrial, really strong development areas, multifamily, single family. And then over on the right, you'll see the Madison County Comp Plan, which pretty much just says this is all single family residential. And if you are annexed within the city of Richmond, you're just grayed out. So there is a little bit of separation between their two comp plans. And even notice there's a little bit inconsistencies, and it's a little bit different comparing the two. The interesting part of it too is that these are both done in 2021, so they were all done the same year. It's not like it was spread out over a few years, but those are their two compliments. So Brett and I kind of got an idea of what we were up against and what we're going to be dealing with, but really talking with the staff of the county and city planning commissions, they were actually very helpful, and they provided us with a lot of great insights on the anticipated development within this area. Even though the study is getting into the Richmond comp plan area and the Madison County comp plan area, they gave us a really good idea of what is yet to come. And on here, you'll see expected development that are located west and immediately east of I-75. In total, there were 11 sites that were identified at that time. I think it's a little bit different now. I think there's even more in that area as we speak, but it's over 1,300 acres of various use of land. We going from commercial, mixed use, residential. There's even a park that's going up there by the Tates Creek roadway. But they're all low to high density, type uses through this area. Now, just like with a lot of other studies, we do like to look at the existing conditions, and one of them we did look at the collision history of this area. This is the collision history that we've pulled up from 2018 to 2022. There was one fatality somewhere in that mix in that map, and as well as 254 collisions that involved injury. Most of those are clustered around the Barnes Mill interchange, as well as the interchange up there at US 25. This is very characteristic of areas where there's several traffic signals and just very minor access management handling on those two roadways. So that was one thing that got us looking at some of our improvement options that Brent will be discussing with you all a little bit later. Now, we also looked at the traffic volumes, and these are the current traffic or numbers that we had at that time. You'll notice that there's a lot of the traffic is over on the Barnes Mill section. There's 12,750, and then even more going eastward over to Eastern Kentucky University. If you're not really familiar where Richmond is located, just south of there is Bucky's. So that's a prominent landmark here in District 7, but we are just north of that. But a lot of changes in land use over on the Goggins side. Most of the development is east of I-75, but they are looking at future development on the west. And so as we did the traffic demand modeling, you'll notice that based with the anticipated development, some growth rates that were applied to the traffic demand modeling, we have noted, we've seen that Barnes Mill and Goggins Lane are seeing the most growth, or at least significant growth in traffic volumes. And so, going from the 7,500 there at Goggins Lane up to 18,500, that's a good amount of traffic that would be adding into that roadway on a full build basis, going out to 2045. So as part of this, we did want to make sure that we had plenty of local coordination with our study. This is it is a small urban area type study, and we did hold 3 local officials and stakeholders meetings. And we had representatives from the city of Richmond, the mayor of Richmond, the county judge executive of Madison County was in attendance, as well as the officials within the county. Also, Representative Gordon Fraser attended. I believe all 3 of the meetings. The first meeting, we discussed mainly the existing conditions and solicit feedback on what improvements or what are some of the areas of concern within our area study. The second meeting, we pretty much went over some of the preliminary improvement concepts and kind of get their feedback on that, or even solicit additional improvement concepts that they would like to see. And then the third meeting, that's when we got the initial concepts presented to them, and then we tried to prioritize them based on like short-term solutions, long-term solutions. A lot of it generated due to the cost of each improvement concept. So yeah, we had a very strong participation actually right through all 3 meetings. We had a pretty good representation and participation for our study, which I think really helped us in the decision making and putting together this plan. So here are some of the existing roadway improvements. Brent's going to talk about what are some of the things that both the state and the local entities could actually do in order to implement this plan.
So if you've ever been through any corridor planning process or small urban area process, sort of we take the same general steps each time, but Casey mentioned that we are, as part of that, we're looking for ideas. What are some of the ideas for improvement? Some of those ideas came from local officials. A A lot of them came from our project team, whether it was internal or with our consultant partners. And then, of course, we go through a process of examining them, analyzing them, determining which ones we think will work the best. So in the end, we came up with a number of different strategies throughout the whole area that we looked at. Our focus was originally on the 876 Barnes Mill corridor and the interchange, but there were a lot of needs that we identified, especially with the growth that you saw on some of those previous slides. The recommendations were categorized into shorter term and longer term solutions. And of course, we looked at everything through a complete streets lens. So we were looking at things that involved road widening, intersection improvements, standalone bike and ped improvements as well. And then what was also important is that we looked at not only state roads, but the local road network too. And I'll talk about that here in a minute. So the I-75 interchange, this is one of the big drivers, the impetus of the study. Some of the operations were an issue in terms of just the sheer traffic congestion that's out there now and anticipating what that's going to be in the future. So this is going to be important to get that ball rolling on this project. But as you know, if you've ever worked on interchanges in an urban area, you can't just look at things in a vacuum at that interchange. All the adjacent intersections and driveways have an impact on how traffic flows and the safety throughout that area. So we heard that there was a travel demand model that was done, but we also made a decision that it was important as we look at the current conditions and then study potential improvements is to build a microsimulation model through this corridor. So this is a little video snippet of one of the interchange options that we looked at. So that interaction of driveways and intersections near the interchange, as well as just how they operate around each other, it's a real issue out there right now. In just a little bit over a half a mile between the interchange ramps and west to that Goggins Lane, which is the north-south route, there's 18 different driveways and intersections in that short stretch. Some of them are quite busy, and some of them are quite close to the interchange ramps. So we really focused in on the need for access management along this corridor, looking at medians, non-traversable medians, controlling turning movements, allowing for U-turns, and then considering circulation on the local road network as well as the internal to some of the development that's already existing. We also saw that there's a strong need in this area for providing areas for people to walk. Certainly, there's going to be a lot of development that includes residential on the west side in the future. There already exists a number of subdivisions and individual houses in that area, but there's going to be a lot more. There's also a lot on the eastern side of the interchange, and we do have some disadvantaged communities over there. So we have commercial things that are on the west side. There's going to be additional commercial, and so there's really a strong need through these attractions, these origins and destinations for people to walk. So our recommendations included providing places for people to walk and bike. This is the intersection of 876 with that north-south local road, which is a major collector, Goggins Lane. And this is going to be a choke point. We already see issues out there now, but I don't know if Casey mentioned in that development slide, one of the major developments that's going on Goggins Lane is a new middle school. It replaces an existing middle school. So we're going to have lots of school traffic within about a year that filters through this intersection. Additionally, we're going to have additional shopping and a lot of residential, and then a new county park that's to the north. That's not just going to be for local residents, but they're going to be trying to attract people from out of state for sporting events. So we have two intersections. This is the major one. And so we studied some different options, one of which was putting in a roundabout. We looked at a single lane and multi-lane. So we realized that with 10,000 plus acres of potential development and the comprehensive plan saying we want development to be here. This is not just rural land, but this is land that they're anticipating that will develop, and seeing that there is a heavy trend in that right now is you're going to need more roadway capacity long term than what exists. We have 3 east-west highways that go through. We have that one north-south roadway that comes through there. And really, so you don't have, if you're going to develop that area, you need a higher density of roads and a more connected network. So we started talking to the local planners about how can we accomplish this. We worked with them to lay out some potential corridors for new local collector roads that could serve this development. They helped us identify where they might tie into the existing road systems. So that's some of the blue dots that you see on there. And then the red lines represent the potential new routes. And you'll notice that they're really curvy looking. One of the ideas that came out through the local involvement was the need for a bypass here. But through our study and our travel demand modeling, there really wasn't a strong need for a bypass. But there was a need to provide connectivity between these developments and between the existing roads. So we laid these out with a target speed of 35 miles an hour. So by doing that through geometry as well as through potentially through roundabouts at the different intersections. By doing this, this will help reduce the strain on the existing road system. Like I said, if you only keep those 3 or 4 existing highways and try to put all your traffic on there as you grow, it's just going to break down and fail. So this provides some redundancy and interconnectivity. It also gives a more direct option for walking and biking. It also helps improve the efficiency of your public services, such as garbage collection, mail delivery, school bus transportation. In our process, we worked with locals to come up with a cross-section for what these collector roads could look like. This is not a final version, but this was a rendering to help visualize what it could be. You can see it's definitely multimodal. It provides for, to remove turning vehicles. It also addresses how the local land use can interface a roadway and work together, as opposed to just putting everybody's backyards and fences along this roadway. The volumes were such where this could actually work and have a much more of a neighborhood type of feel. And then finally, the last piece of this is coming up with, well, these are great ideas. How do you actually get them towards reality? Of course, everybody in the room and online is familiar with our funding processes, but we talked about how, talked about that with them, laid out some ideas in terms of the 6-year highway plan process, but also different grant funding opportunities. And fortunately, out of this, we actually received 3 projects in the new highway plan that came as a result of the study. But it's not just the state funding, the federal funding that's going to make this work. It really has to be buy-in at the local level. And so we identified some strategies, some recommendations for them to take the ball and run with. The first part is they each have their comprehensive plan, and they can take our recommendations that come out of this study and adopt them as part of their comprehensive plan. So then that's used as a guide towards any future decisions. That cross section for the collector road can be taken and finalized and put into their subdivision standards as for the collector roads. And then probably maybe the most important piece of this is right-of-way preservation. The last thing we want is to lay out roadway improvement ideas and then have a subdivision put smack in the middle of where a new road might be, or a bunch of backyards built and preventing us from being able to widen an existing road. So putting this into the comprehensive plan and laying it out in their processes to then take this into account when they make land use decisions. One of the things that we put together was a cheat sheet, or what we call a cheat sheet. And this is just a tool that will allow the people on the planning commission as well as the planning staff to look and see what needs to be done when they consider zone changes, when they look at development plans and platting land. What are the things that they need to consider in terms of transportation and corridor preservation, and even working with the local developers to build pieces of those local roads. Let Casey wrap things up for us.
I think we're running a little bit short on time, but that's okay. I'll go through this really quickly. But these are some of the conclusions that kind of outline what we've really learned out of this study. One of the things that Brent was talking about is the local network needs, and really one of the things that we have been presenting to the Planning and Zoning Commissions of Madison and Richmond County is that the success of the implementation of this plan. I mean, it's not really what the state can provide to them. It's what we could do in partnership with the local entities to implement a lot of these strategies that we have here on this plan. But yeah, it's something that really requires a local component, just like as we just heard about with the LCI initiative, a little bit tied into that. But anyway, but yeah, it is something that, with that collaboration, we could see success. And this is just a QR code. If you like to check out the full report, things 200 plus pages long. But it really outlines, we had a lot of project sheets in there as well and also strategies on how to implement the study. So.
One or two questions.
Okay.
That's a couple up there.
Like, to like adding what you have to their kind of existing network fixes, even if that is a good play about like 2045.
So the question is, the local collector road system, will that help alleviate, or was it the idea to help alleviate the traffic congestion on the other existing roads? And the answer is yes. That's part of the issue. It's also to help alleviate some of the circuity in travel that would be required to get from one place to another. Typically, we have subdivisions that just build entrances right off of our main roadways that exist. Sometimes you might require a little connection between one neighborhood and another, sometimes not. But that forces everybody to get out on the main road and do a longer travel. The collector network will, in theory, help alleviate that. I don't think that the multimodal recommendations, although it would have some effect on traffic levels, that really is probably going to be not a very large effect. The question was, about whether the planning commissions are looking or will adopt this. And we have been in conversation with both of them, both the Richmond and the Madison County. I think that there is interest in it, but we're in the early stages of those discussions. And so we met with each of them. And I don't know if Casey wants to chime in on this at all, but we will have further discussions to try to get that in there. That's something that's fairly easy because it's within their control. It doesn't require any funding to make that happen.
That was good.
All right. Well, thank you all very much.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Casey and. All right, last speakers. Contessa and Caleb could come on up. Yeah. We can share slideshow from beginning. We're somewhat caught up. Don't want to slow us down anymore, but our next two speakers are both from the KYTC Title VI office, Caleb Houchins and Contessa Barnes. Caleb is a graduate of both Eastern Kentucky University and the University of Kentucky. He started in May of 2023 and as a program investigator, and he monitors the federal non-discrimination compliance under Title VI and conducts EEO investigations under Title VI. And then Contessa is a graduate of the University of Louisville. We won't hold that against her. But she joined in December 2022 in the Office of Civil Rights and Small Business Development as a program investigator. She's the coordinator of the Minority Internship Program and primarily conducts EEO investigations under Title VI. All right, please welcome both presenters as they speak on Title VI.
Morning, everybody. In my time here, I have become the primary Title VI contact for our subrecipients. So if you have not heard from me, you will soon enough. And this can be used for your annual Title VI training for everybody in attendance.